Hello, everyone. Good evening. First of all, I'd like to send you some links which can be useful during my speech. My speech will be rather uh, practically because I'd like to tell you a short story about the part of the program created by Europäische Janusz Korczak Akademie. And I'd like to share my presentation. Um, uh, yes, and I'd like to also thank Lydia Borgida from Europäische Janusz Korczak Akademie that she taught about me as a speaker for today. So the program was named, as you can see, Respect, Dialogue, Participation. The leaders of the project were Stanisław Skibinski, who is the director of Europäische Janusz Korczak Akademie, and Eleni Lova, also from Europäische Janusz Korczak Akademie from Janusz Korczak House in Berlin. The rest of the team and many details you can see on its website, rdt.eka.org. Among other trainers, I had the honor and great pleasure to co-create and conduct part of these workshops in two editions in 2018 and 2019, and also conduct one additional workshop after these two sessions. I'm not an employee of Europäische Janusz Korczak Akademie, but we have fruitful cooperation since 2016 probably, when I conducted the first workshop, Korczak workshop in Janusz Korczak House in Berlin. So the main purpose of the Respect to Dialogue Participation program was to connect Korczak's thought, practice, and approach with contemporary ideas around conflict resolution, to allow participants to create together concepts of conflict resolution based on Korczak's approach. All workshops had 3 blocks, and each block lasted 2 days. I was in the group of trainers who conducted the first block about Janusz Korczak, and that's the part of the program I'd like to tell you about today, because I'm not an expert in conflict resolution area, and I didn't participate in those parts of the project. So I really I'd like to focus on Janusz Korczak. And during workshops I spoke English, but most of the materials I prepared in German. My story will not report. I don't want to tell you, about the project in a chronological order, but rather give you a summary, some crucial things we taught participants and at the same time learned during that project. I'd like to tell you something about our participants because they were a group of amazing people, highly motivated, engaged. Some of them had experience in the Korczak area, and many of them had experiences in the conflict resolution area. They were great, and they are great, I think. We didn't need to make them Korczak experts, but to give them as much knowledge about Korczak's approach as it was necessary to use it in an adequate way to build Korczak-based conflict resolution concepts. Nevertheless, much more important than knowledge was the key message of our workshop, which connected history and present time, our topic and our activities. The key message was about the essential Korczak's value, which can be named, from my perspective, I believe, the subjectivity or agency in English. However, Korczak didn't use this word. Subjectivity, of course, it has many meanings and definitions, but it's very close to respect. Like you remember in the famous Korczak's book, A Child's Right to Respect. Respect for weaknesses and creativity, for failures and successes, for decisions and its consequences, uh, which was Korczak's unique achievement, I believe, was making the subjectivity the fundamental value and assumption of institutions he created, like Orphan's Home, Our Home, or the Little Review newspaper. In some texts, I proposed also the name for it, institutions based on subjectivity. He tried to implement their many ideas and solutions to meet the following challenge: how to treat as human beings many people with their various needs, emotions, behaviors, many things in one group, institution, or society. I believe he met that extremely difficult challenge successfully, and this is a great inspiration for people in the present day. During our workshops in the Respect Dialogue Participation program, we tried not only to speak about Korczak's subjectivity, but also to give our participants to feel the same. I'm deeply convinced that if you teach about Korczak, you should try to create something like a Korczakian climate or atmosphere of respect and participation between all of the people who who meet around Korczak. I hope we did it. You can find a very short description of the concept institutions based on subjectivity in my text. This is the link to the website of Deutsch-Polnisches Jugendwerk. It's in German and Polish, but there are also links to English sources. Okay, except for subjectivity as an essential value, I can reconstruct four main goals for the Korczakian part of the workshop. To build or make stronger an emotional connection between participants and Korczak, depending on the fact they had any connection before or not. To give our participants minimum knowledge about Korczak, his biography, thought, and achievements, minimum as it would be necessary to use it during the next steps of the program. The third, to give our participants maximum experience in the area of making connections between history and the present day, between Korczak's reality and their own needs and experience. And the fourth, to help them understand the uniqueness of Korczak's approach. To achieve our goals, we had lectures and exercise in the four main areas. They are Korczak's biography, interpersonal relationships of Korczak, Korczak's methods, especially the collegial card, and of course, Korczak's books. I told a story about Janusz Korczak's life using the great tool invented by Catherine Deal. You can see it here. Catherine Deal. It allows building an amazing atmosphere of this story. That tool is named Janusz Korczak box or Janusz Korczak Kiste in German. It can be used in many ways. Our way was rather simple. Before the workshop, we put inside the box many contemporary things which can be associated with important parts of Korczak's life. For example, his photo when he was a 10 years old boy, wooden blocks, because Korczak, as you know, loved to play wooden blocks, The Star of David, postcard from Warsaw, syringe or stethoscope, something connected to medical stuff. Janusz Korczak's book, Stefania Wilczyńska's photo of the orphans home, many things, issue, a little review, a small radio, something connected with Palestine, glasses connected with Korczak, and many things. At the beginning of this part biography, we asked participants to build a collaborative story using Janusz Korczak box. However, of course, they didn't know that name yet. All participants, one by one, took out one thing of Janusz Korczak box and told one sentence which should not be connected with Janusz Korczak, but connected with this thing. For example, someone took, I don't know, the Russian book connected with Russian history of Korczak's life of late 19th century or the beginning of the 20th century. So someone took the Russian book and said, once upon a time there was a Russian writer. The next one took wooden blocks and said he or she lived in the forest. And they continued this story until the box was empty. And they had their own story. And each participant had one thing from the box, and it was, her or his thing. It was like, emotional connection. Next, I told the story about Korczak's life and asked them to put adequate things into the Janusz Korczak box during my story. For example, when I said Henrik Goldschmidt as a boy loved to play the wooden blocks, someone who had the wooden blocks put them into the Janusz Korczak box. That way, the potentially abstract lecture about Korczak's life was transformed into an intimate story engaging the participants' imagination, creativity, and movement. So, really, congrats, Catherine Dill. Next area, interpersonal relationships. I conducted this workshop not during this many sessions in 2018 and 19, but during the additional meeting just before the pandemic chaos, late 2019. I used in this workshop some texts Korczak wrote to or about someone important for him. It was letters to Feiga Lifshitz. We don't know her photo, so it's instead of her photo. It's Dan Goldik, letter to Dan Goldik, and to Madzia, Magdalena, and Edwin Marcusa, sister and brother. Feiga Lifshitz was a young educator in the orphans' home. She moved to Palestine and became a friend of Stefania Wilczyńska. Madzia and Edwin were young collaborators of Korczak in the editorial board of the Little Review. They also moved to Palestine. At last, Dan Goldik, we know only from Korczak's letter. He was maybe a 1-year boy when Korczak wrote a letter to him, also to Palestine. And the last text, it's not a letter. It's about Wosia Wolańska, who was a Polish washerwoman in the orphans' home for many decades. We don't know, her photo. That's why it's instead in a symbolic way painting of Onera Domiał. When Wosia Wolańska died during the Second World War, Korczak wrote about her really moving and outstanding text, something between obituary and elegy. But Unfortunately, it's not translated into English. That's why I'd like to give you an example of one of these texts from the letter to Dengildig. My dear boy, this note might be mislaid and lost 1,000 times before you glance at it properly. And all the indications are you will never read it. I'm writing nonetheless, and when I noted down your name and address, I suppose I hoped that maybe all the same, who knows how and why, but maybe it would be of use to you. I glimpsed for only a fleeting moment, but long enough to wish you many good and beautiful things in life, small and still frail citizen of the world. It's, in my opinion, it's really amazing. It's a wonderful letter to a 1 year boy. Um, After a very short introduction, participants were given all 4 texts in German. Their task was to read it and write 3 types of reflection. What would you like to write to Korczak? What would you like to ask him directly? And what would you like to ask about Korczak? They wrote it, and they chose 1, 2 sentences from the reflection and wrote them on the appropriate flip chart. And all participants could read all reflections in flip chart. Then, thanks to that exercise, participants could build specific connections, emotional connections with Korczak. Imagine how it's to be like people who are important for him. Uh, they also could share it, share their reflections, and other participants were inspired by someone reflection or request, by someone's other reflection or request. The crucial part of the whole workshop was dedicated to Korczak methods, of course. It was impossible to discuss all the methods. That's why we focused on the most important, and no one, I mean, the collegial court and Korczak wrote why it was the most important method. It's really fundamental method of Korczak, and the presentation of this method takes the biggest part of his book, How to Love a Child, the Orphan's Home. It's more than half of a book. We started from the introduction to the history of the Orphan's Home, the way of functioning this institution, and the most important methods. Next, I emphasized the importance of the collegial court, on the one hand from Korczak's perspective, but on the other hand, from the perspective of the conflict resolution area. After that, we started the exercise. I split the group into small teams. Participants were given handouts with the paragraphs of the collegial court and read carefully all of the paragraphs. As you know, it's 109. However, the last paragraph has number 1000. We discussed some unclear issues and went to teamwork. Each team was a group of judges of the collegial court. I read them examples of the real cases of the collegial court from the book How to Love a Child, the Orphan's Home. Here we have examples. An older girl, without asking for permission, she took scissors that are the private property of the caregiver, misplaced them, and in 4 weeks, not once did she come to explain herself. She does not even look for them. One is not allowed to make noise in the dormitory, but they messed up his bed. Therefore, he scolded them angrily and thus loudly. Some people will find this case funny as well. Both were relieving themselves in the toilet one accidentally and intentionally sprinkled the other, who then deliberately did the same to him. And the question is, which paragraph is the most appropriate here? Which is the most adequate? Um, the task of each group was to decide together about it. Then I remember maybe 6 examples or something like that. In the book, we have many examples. Um, then teams shared their ideas and justified them. After that, I present also the real, I mean, decision, yeah, the real decisions paragraphs which were given in the collegial court. For example, in this case, we have really high paragraph. It's very close to 1,000. And here is rather low. And here is also relatively high. In our experience, this exercise is an opportunity for participants to immerse themselves in that collegial court method and understand it deeply. Of course, it doesn't matter if the paragraphs invented by teams were the same or similar to paragraphs given in the orphan's home. It doesn't matter. The most important was to use the mechanism of thinking, how to resolve these problems without punishment and with the respect for each person who was engaged in the situation. And the last part, it was rather interactive lecture, not workshop. I presented my choice of books by Korczak. Um, you can see it, How to Love a Child's Right to Respect, When I Am a Little Again, King Mat the First, Kajtek the Wizard, and Korczak's Diary, Get to Diary. I tried to show these books not by summarizing them, but rather by discussing the main problems they contain. Pedagogical thoughts, of course, personal experiences of Korczak, empathy as his main approach to the people, especially children, but also to the world, and the very deep reflection on the connections between power, political in the Kingdom the First, or magical in the Kajtek the Wizard. So between power and responsibility. We need it also today, I believe. Um, I can tell you that the basic dimension we stressed during the whole program was the humanistic values that Korczak perceived as crucial for his activity and theory. He teaches us how to treat people as human beings with respect and mindfulness. And that's the perspective we should consider when we are now looking for ideas for improving relationships, conflict resolution methods, or the work of institution. Uh, that's the perspective. I think it's still fresh and it can be very inspiring. I hope our workshops gave the participants this perspective as well as many inspirations, knowledge, and insights. Thank you very much. That's all.